creating that win-win thing. You didn't have to beat someone into the ground. You just had to figure a way that whatever you're proposing actually worked for both of you. And that's one of the things that I think has kind of stayed with me forever.
In a world yearning for change, there exists a community of visionaries and innovators, united by a common goal to solve Earth's biggest challenges. Join us. Together, let's create a balanced, sustainable future for all.
Hello, everyone. I am Cristina Imre, your host today and the founder of Tech Leadership Lab, with a very strong and audacious vision to solve those 17 SDGs sooner, the Sustainable Development Goals, and act as good ancestors around with Tech Leadership Lab for the generations to come. I was in the trenches for over 2 decades to understand human nature and success combined, and be ready to lead something big, a movement, a new ecosystem of amazing people that will influence all of us. Today's conversation is about success. It's about leadership, it's about money, it's about helping tech entrepreneurs and good-hearted leaders, change makers around the world, to gain knowledge and useful tips, lessons from someone who made it. And I hope that we will have a super open, transparent conversation about topics that are useful for such leaders around the globe. And we will discuss with my awesome guest today, Larry Namer. I'm super excited to have him here with us, who is known as one of the co-founders of E-Entertainment Television, a company that I believe everywhere in the globe is a name, the E! Channel, the Kardashians, and all those reality shows that now today are known as influencers of the pop culture as we know it today. And so he sold his company for $3 billion some years ago. Now it's worth over $5 billion. He's a billionaire. He knows the deal inside the money aspects, and he's also creator of several successful companies in the United States and worldwide. He also received the Hollywood Lifetime Achievement in Entertainment Award. And as being a cable industry pioneer, Larry here, he has a career starting in 1971, at Time Incorporated Manhattan Cable. Maybe we will go there a little bit, and served as a vice president and general manager of Valley Cable Television in Los Angeles, and the nation's first 61 channel two-way cable system. His vision and direction was always huge from the beginning. And we will see this, if it was intuition, it was knowledge, it was learning process, what was it? Because he was in the background of many, many, many successful projects, and he just knew, oh, this is the way. I mean, cable, I understand now cable, each other. Those were some interesting steps you took, Larry. I'm super interested to learn. But just for the audience who doesn't know you from the background, you also become recognized as one of the world's leading experts on new technology. And this is super interesting. You didn't stop. You are now with AI. You understand what is going on in the world. You continue to innovate. And that's why you, in my mind, you are such a good role model to give examples and lessons to leaders who want to succeed. Because among the companies that have enlisted your expertise are Microsoft, Paul Allen's DJO, World Digital Media Group, EchoStar, Sirius Radio Network, the list goes on and on. So I am super welcoming you here today at our show, Larry.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's good to be here.
And I would love to dig deeper. You're a successful person. You had a long life, and hopefully you will have even more so from now on, with the longevity and everything around this, and you are taking good care of your health, as I know. Let's start with success, because there are several definitions. What is success to you? What is your definition of success?
Well, mine is you realize you're successful when you get to the point where you don't have to do anything you really don't want to, and the only reason you're doing it is for the money.
Okay. Yeah. And if you would think about, many people say it's about luck, it's hard work, it's the right mindset. What would be your recipe? What do you think is your recipe for financial wealth?
Well, I think number one, just I think hard work is certainly part of it, but I think keeping an open mind and not really um, staying dependent on legacy issues and stuff, and realizing that um, change is inevitable, and the ability to not fear change and spend all your time fighting it, but realize the things that like AI is a great example. Everybody's spending so much time trying to fight it and control it and whatever, and there's no question that it's going to be so. It's looking at things early on and recognizing the inevitability of those and getting involved early before, in my case, before all the big media companies get there, and eventually you sell them the companies. So
And if we go back to your life, because now you do have this maturity and wisdom to analyze your life with different eyes, if you go back into your childhood, what do you think were the ingredients for you to get here? Because there can be character traits and obviously environmental traits, family, modeling, and so on. What do you think now, if you go through your life, what were the main ingredients that made you successful?
well, I think, if you go back to early childhood and stuff, I don't think there's any one thing, but I think it's a group of things that kind of come together. First of all, the parents and grandparents were immigrants, and their aspiration for their children was that, they would do whatever they had to do so their children would have a better life. So, my father had two jobs, my mother worked and stuff like that. So there was, and there was an expectation very early on that, the kids would work. I mean, didn't just go to school. So, starting at 12 years old, I had to get, either after school jobs and then summer jobs and stuff. So work was always part of life. But also, this, um, this pushing from the parents that whether you liked it or not, you were going to have a better and easier life than they did, or at least a better life. And but the neighborhood we grew up in, we didn't realize um, when we lived there that we were poor, because everybody around that we all lived basically the same. And things were good. We weren't unhappy, but we were very multicultural, multi-ethnic neighborhood. I mean, it was heavily African American, very heavily Puerto Rican. There was large Italian
This in
group.
Brooklyn, right? In Brooklyn.
This in Brooklyn, but in Coney Island, Brooklyn. Now Brooklyn is very trendy. It's not the same Brooklyn that I grew up in. But Coney Island hasn't been gentrified yet. It's still pretty much a poor neighborhood. And but we grew up with groups of people that were very different than us. It wasn't a homogenized area, so we really never had fear of other people. And it's one of the things that lets me be reasonably successful when I go into other countries and other markets. I mean, I've had successes in China and successes in Russia and Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union and stuff. And, where I think most American companies that gone in there went in there with the idea that they were going to change them and Americanize them. Mine has been totally different. It's, my mother always said, when you're a guest in someone's house, you act as a guest. And you don't try and force your thinking on them. You basically either adapt to their thinking or you go somewhere else. So, so I think it's a combination of all those things that, have kind of helped me along.
Did you feel loved as a child?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Even though, again, it was different, back in the day, it was not unusual for, your dad to take his belt off and whack you in the butt. And stuff. Now we can go to jail for it, but that's just the way they grew up and the way it was, and it was fine. I always felt loved. So yeah.
We will do a recap, but now because I know that you also have kids, what were the lessons that you knew that were good for you that you applied also in your household?
Well, I guess one of the main ones, and then again, a lot of my success and people marvel at, my ability to, have a successful company in Russia and successful company in China, and E is in 142 countries. It was really the first one to to really get out there to multiple countries. It's probably still in more countries than any other cable network around. But my mom, after my dad passed, my mom, lived in Florida, and I would go visit, and she would insist that I stayed in her guest room on some uncomfortable couch. But I would say, "Hey, mom, tonight I want to go for Italian food at 8 o'clock," and she go, "No, we're going to the deli at 5:30," and I'm like, "Well, I don't eat at 5:30," and her response would be, "Go, you're in my house, you follow my rules, or you go somewhere else," and that's really why I think I've been able to do business in countries like Russia and Russia, where most Americans have failed, is because it's just this ingrained thing. I'm a guest. And, as my mother said, if you don't like the rules, you're not there to change the rules. You're there to either obey the rules or go somewhere else. And, like I say, particularly in China, we just do so much stuff there that most Americans have not been allowed to do or able to do. And it's because we're respectful of their culture and their government. And like I say, we're there to entertain people, not to change their way of thinking in terms of their governments or anything like that. So.
This is absolutely helpful, and we will juggle between childhood and present, because now you pinpointed a very important aspect that also for Tech Leadership Lab, it is in the center. If we want to solve our existential problems on Earth, like climate and all the others, we need to truly understand the other. So you were exposed to active listening from the beginning, because, okay, if I need to respect the household rules, then I need to know them first, right? And so you start with a mentality of, oh, it's not about me, it's about them. Let's understand their culture, their language, their house rules, and then see how we can work together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, China's a good example. We've been in China now for 13 years, very successfully and without any problems and stuff. And, when I looked to go into that market, the first thing I did was I looked and said, why have most Western companies failed in China? And it would be things like, Rupert Murdoch would go in and go, here's here's a show that I do in Australia, and I'll dub it in Mandarin for you, and, blah, blah, blah. And, the Chinese, they're very proud to be Chinese. I mean, they want to learn about the West, but they don't necessarily want to be us. And, I just said, if I'm going to go in the market, I have to produce stuff and create stuff that's specific to their market and their audience. And certainly I have to do it in their language. To go in and think I'm going to dub, take my American programming and dub it in Mandarin and it's going to work, was just it's very naive. So everything we do in China is in Mandarin, and it's specifically created and designed to serve the needs of the people from that country.
And this brings us to a controversial topic around TikTok. I know you are a TikTok fan because it helps your business as well, and you learn a lot about culture. You know that there were some controversies, especially in the US, that, TikTok is very clever because it wants to just dumb down the Americans, but they are keeping their education high, because TikTok audience in China has completely a different type of videos, educational, scientific type of videos, compared to the West or the other countries. So how do you see this? What would you answer?
Well, I think, it's a combination of both. I think, China may be a little bit too overregulated. And then we do stuff for ByteDance, and we do things in China for TikTok, and we love short form programming. I think in America, we need to have, some level of government regulation on some of this, and not just TikTok. I think you look at all social media. I don't think, just letting kids do whatever they want, whenever they want, is the smartest thing. So, I think you need a little bit of government regulation, but I think you need a lot more. You need to develop a generation of parents that are more thoughtful and more concerned on how they bring their kids up and what they let their kids do. I mean, a lot of bringing up children is the responsibility of the parents. It's not necessarily the responsibility of, some government regulators. I don't think that banning TikTok or anything is an effective way to do it, because, somebody will say, hey, what did TikTok do good? And Facebook will step in and where TikTok used to be. And, you'll just have a lot of people fill in that void. If people want to do something, they're going to find a way to do it. You're not going to block them from the technology. I mean, even in China, where everybody says, oh, yeah, everything is so restricted. I mean, you could get a VPN and you could literally get to anything you want if you want to. But, parents in China are very different than parents in the United States. I mean, I have to say, the whole social structure there, they had all these years of one-child policy. And they also have early retirement. So you have two parents, they have one kid, you have two parents that work, but then you have two sets of grandparents. So you have six adults taking care of one person, and the importance of education is right at the top. So, there's a lot of regulation by the parents over the kids, and, and plus the relationship, I think, I love it in China for certain reasons. Kids know their grandparents in China. And there's a respect for elders and the knowledge that elders bring. I don't really see that in the West very much. Most kids in the US, they have a brief period where they know their grandparents and that's it. They go off to college in different places, and so they don't have the support systems that I see kids having in China there. And like I say, the regulation by parents over the kids, what they do in the education process is quite different than what I see here.
The support system is a very, very important topic. And you see, that's why I would consider that it's not just the parents, it's the regulations and the institutions. Because if you
Yes.
don't allow, I love that quote, that it takes a village to grow a child. And if you would include this in the Western society, it would be so good, because then you do have the time indeed to also build a business, but also to know that responsible adults are looking for your child when you are not there. Because if you need to hustle, you're in a hustle culture all the time, and you just don't have the time to supervise your kids. Even if you love them and you want the best for them, they will get loose based on the culture that they will see online and what their peers are doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think the answer to it is there are multiple answers. It's some level of regulation, it's parenting, it's grandparenting, it's creating the village and the support systems for these kids to keep them on the right track.
How did you enter then in China? Please teach us, because I can see unity as the next step we need in our world, to see us as one species, that we have some issues, we need to solve them, and we cannot just based on borders or nations. What did you do to enter in China?
Well, in China, again, I have a totally separate company, and everybody who works for us in the Beijing office basically is they interned in the West. So, again, my Mandarin is very poor, so I need to speak English for the most of the time. But the folks who work for us all started out as interns in the West. They worked in the LA office, and then they returned to mainland. So they have the best of Western business practices, and particularly, in the area of creativity, because I found that, a little bit lacking in China just because of the way people are brought up. Everybody there is kind of got the best of Western business etiquette and business techniques, and some of the creativity. And then so the team there, I'm the only non-Chinese person in the company. So when I create stuff there, it's very much designed for the Chinese audience. For example, the first show we did, I mean, everybody knows E and E News, but we created a show there called Hello Hollywood, where we actually brought a host from China here, and they go around to the parties and the premieres and they cover Hollywood, but they cover it from the perspective of what does the Chinese audience want to know, not what necessarily, an American audience wants to know. Yeah, a good example, we had an interview coming up with Tom Cruise, and, in America, the team would go, yeah, well, we want to know about Scientology and, his religion and, his divorces and stuff like that. In China, it's very different. The biggest question was like, what do you do with your kids on the weekend? Much sweeter, much gentler, different. So we really focus in on like what does their audience want to know, not necessarily give them what an American audience wants to know.
Yeah, so the focus, it's like with beauty. What is beauty? It is just a perception that
Yeah,
became pop culture. Because if I put you 10 pictures of women, beautiful women from their respective culture and time period, they will look completely different than what we perceive as beauty today. It is perception,
yeah.
basically. Okay, let's go back now and connect again the childhood. So what I get here is that you learn very quickly to have a work ethic, that you need to be responsible in the house. You're not just a kid who is nurtured and gets everything he wants, but also needs to put some sweat there. You also had that no fear around other diverse people with different backgrounds, just because you grew up between them. I am also very curious, how did you perceive failure as a kid in this particular situation, environment?
Well, I when I got to the junior high school and high school level, I was very active in sports. I played baseball, but then in high school, I played football, which was one of the most popular sports you could possibly do in America and stuff. And so you really learned how to play through pain, and stuff like that. And when you learn new things in the sport, you'd have 100 failures before you'd have one success. And there were like 40 kids that were allowed to be on the team, but there were several hundred kids that wanted to be on the team. So you had to be one, and most kids would try and they would fail and quit. It was those kids that had the perseverance that just said, okay, I failed, I'm going to do it again. I failed, I'm going to do it again. I failed, I'm going to do it. And it was those 40 that remained through all the failures, because when you're first learning how to play at that level, you're not very good and stuff like that. And like I say, you go through 100 failures before you get to, learning the technique and being successful. So, and that we had a very good coach who taught us that, how to push through the failures and stuff. And again, that remained with me literally throughout my life.
And if you would need to consider what were the worst experiences as a child, what comes to mind?
Um, I don't really think I had. I look back on it, I was a happy kid and my parents were good and my friends were good. I'm still friends with my friends from high school. So even though, I've reached this level of success on a, global scale, the people that have kind of come after, I consider them more acquaintances. Um, but it's my friends from high school that I really feel are my friends and stuff, and I relate to them better and stuff like that. So I don't really have anything where I look back and find that I should have done maybe, a girlfriend here and there that didn't work out. But no, in general, I look back and it's nothing but good.
Now that is interesting that you say that you kept a close relationship with those in high school. this doesn't happen too often, especially with people who just detach themselves and they go so high. So I'm curious if this is also about the way you were accepting everyone from your upbringing, or it was also you helped them, maybe you helped them with money or their businesses, or what, how did you manage to have those relationships maintained
Well,
today?
it was a very it's actually a very interesting neighborhood because again, we were the poor, we were poor. We didn't know we were poor, but we all lived together and stuff like that. But we went to a public high school. It was called Abraham Lincoln High School in Brooklyn. And it basically served the poor and then a almost poor neighborhood. And but to this day, and this is really weird and unusual, there are more Nobel Prize winners that have come out of that high school than any other high school in America, which is really odd. Even now, I think the last physics Nobel went to a Lincoln high school person and stuff like that. So this whole idea of work ethic and multicultural and stuff like that was not just ingrained in me; it was ingrained in a lot of people who have gone on to massive success, and not just in the field of academics. If you look at entertainment, famous singer Neil Diamond, Neil Sedaka, the actor Lou Gossett Jr., who's Academy Award winner, Harvey Keitel. These are all people that came out of that high school. So the school was great for creating really smart academics and really top of the world entertainers and stuff like that. So it's pretty amazing what's come out of that neighborhood. So I think a lot of what we're talking about is the environment that environment nurtured successful people and still continues to do so.
Inclusive, diverse environment with a very important, strong work ethic. Nice.
Yeah.
It's funny. Wow, Neil Sedaka. I didn't hear him for a long time, but I was a fan, so I need to go back now. Thanks for this. I didn't know it came from there. So if we come today from this knowledge, and you go through your life, let's see now your relationship with money, because it's so important. Do you think that to gain a lot of wealth in your life, it's a matter of, again, mindset, success, upbringing? What is it? What was your relationship with money?
Well, it was clearly, at the beginning, it was you were pushed by the parents that you were going to have a better life than they do. And, my dad, again, kind of coming from Turkish immigrant background and stuff, he wanted me to go to a certain high school that, and I did. I got into like a very high level high school there that you had to take a test, and I think only 1% of the people who took the test got into this school and stuff. And it was really and so he kind of pushed me to go there, and I hated it, and I lasted only a year, and I said, Dad, I got to get out of here. I had to travel for an hour and a half to get there every day on the train, and an hour and a half home, and it was an all boys school. There were no girls. And all my friends from the neighborhood are going to this Lincoln High School, and I'm not. So so I did that, and and then I went on to a local college and stuff like that. But the need to have enough money to live and support yourself. So yes, at the beginning it was all striving. It was all about money. And then that kind of changed in later life for a whole host of reasons. I mean, he obviously, is very successful and, on many levels, including finance. But then I think the time that it really changed for me to move away from everything was about money and there's nothing else that was important is when my older son, my son John, was 15, was diagnosed with brain cancer. And, to be a parent of a kid that gets that diagnosis changes your life. You basically, I mean, and I got to say, I'll give you the end of the story. He got into experimental stuff, and he's now 20 years cancer free. So he's still around and stuff like that. But you really realize the how life is more important, family is more important, and there are things that are so much more important than money. Not that money isn't important. I mean, you don't want to be poor, and you don't want to have to worry about paying the rent and eating and doing all of that. But there are other things that kind of rose up in my mind.
But this was a long
There,
journey because if you say he was 15, your child, your son, and you already had success, but until
yeah,
then you were focused on the money.
yeah.
Okay. And as a child, when you considered yourself like every child about the future, how did you see yourself? Rich, successful, or what were the attributes of your future
No,
self?
it was, and again, coming kind of from that immigrant mentality and immigrant background, my parents' wish for their children was to get stability, to, get a civil service job, work for the government, get a pension, be able to retire at 65. It was never to be rich. It was always to be comfortable and secure. So that was kind of where that came. So I was the kid in the family who differed from that, and I wanted to go off and have more excitement in my life. So I went to Hollywood.
Okay, you went to Hollywood and you started to work in 71, right? At the Manhattan Cable. And
Yeah.
you started from the ground. I'm super curious because I think there were many things that happened with you. We have the background, we have the personality traits and how you were like taught by your parents and surrounding. And here you just jump in to start something where you had education compared to the others. Your coworkers didn't even knew how to read some, right?
Yeah.
You did have this kind of educated person. But why did you go there, and what was the initial reason to start working in
Well,
cable?
I graduated college. I needed to get a job, and my degree was in economics. And I found out that there weren't a lot of jobs for people with degrees in economics. Um, so
Wow.
I ended up with someone I knew. Their dad had was part of the electrical workers union, electrician. And he said to me, he goes, well, we organized this thing. It's called cable TV. I don't really know what it is, but I could give you the name of the head union guy there and just tell them that the union sent you and they'll give you some, what I thought was going to be a temporary job until I figured out what I do with the economics degree. So I went there and yeah, sure, certain enough, I met the head of the union from Manhattan Cable and they gave me a job as an assistant underground splicer, which meant that I would go below the streets of New York every day and help put the wires together um, with the roaches and the rats and everything. And they paid me $90 a week uh, and stuff. And but then all of a sudden they would say, "Hey, kid, how come you know how to use this equipment? It usually takes someone a year or two to learn it, and you learned it in 2 weeks." And I'm like, "Well, I read the instruction booklet." Um, so I kind of started moving up the ranks. So from assistant splicer, I became a splicer, and then a construction guy, and then a service guy. But then, Time Incorporated, which was a magazine company at the time, publishing company, they bought Manhattan Cable, and so you had all these Harvard and Yaleys folks, up on Sixth Avenue, and then you had these people who would go under the ground of Manhattan and and do whatever it is and stuff. And somebody in the union, they were negotiating the contract with the company against Time Inc. So they had all these Harvard Yaleys, and then you had all these union people. And they said, kid, we want you to, I think I was 23. We want to put you on the negotiating committee of the contract. And I'm like, I don't know anything. And they're going, well, but you know how to read, so it's good. So they put me on the negotiating committee. And so, here I was, 23 years old, negotiating, contracts for the cable TV workers of America, um, and and against all these people who graduated Harvard and Yale and Princeton and all of that. So I got noticed by them. So the people at Time Inc. were saying, "Wait a second, who's the one who knows how to read?" Um, and so anyway, we negotiated that. But then the union said, "You did great. We really love it. We're going to make you the vice chairman of the Cable TV Workers Union." And I'm like, okay. So at 23, I was the vice chairman of the labor union, um, which was weird. So I had to deal with like all the Harvard and Yale guys like on a regular basis because we always had that business we had to deal with. And then finally they just said, "Hey, we want you to come into management." And I'm like, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm a union guy." But then they figured out how to make me the proverbial offer I couldn't refuse. So at 25, I moved from being the union person to going into management, and eventually rose to be the head of operations. So, I was like 26 years old and had 300 and something people reporting to me and stuff like that. But it was really good because I was managing the people that I used to work with. So I knew exactly what their problems were and what their jobs were and stuff like that. So it made it relatively easy for me. So I did well and I kind of rose up the ranks to, like I said, to eventually become director of operations for all of Manhattan Cable. So
A short cut here, just to up level your camera again. A second. Yeah.
how's that?
Yes, it's good. Thanks. Okay, now people who are listening to you would say, this was luck, or it was opportunity. When opportunity meets the right skill set and it's just the right moment. What do you think it was in your case? In a way that you don't deflate everyone who says, "Oh my God, if I don't have that kind of moment, I'm not in the right spot, I cannot make it."
Well, I think it's, for me, and again, not necessarily conscious at the time, but looking back, I'd say, okay, is I realized that this was going to be a huge industry. People were going, "Oh, nobody will ever pay for television." So it's being able to see something, know that things are about to change, and to jump in and say, "Okay, how do I play a significant role in this inevitable thing that's going to roll out?" And I was part of that company when somebody decided that they were going to start home box office, and so we were all part of that stuff. And we really felt we were creating the future. And for me, that was really exciting and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount of luck and being in the right place at the right time that always comes to play. But it's really, having the work ethic, having the skill set, and having the vision
That keeps you there, right?
that keeps you there. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm curious because it seems you had a curiosity inside of you. You are a curious nature, right? And
Yeah.
okay, that I think it is one of the traits that I see in successful people, because you wanted to create the future and you saw things that for you were obvious and for others not. And this is basically what separates the innovators from those who are just like average in their lives. So tell us about E, because that was very obvious to you and everyone around said, "Huh, what is that? I don't know what you want to build," but you were very clear with your vision.
Yeah, well, I ended up, so being the head of operations in Manhattan, I knew how you build underground cable systems. Of course, Manhattan was the only underground cable system in the country. But then the big cities all decided cable was something they wanted, but all the big cities wanted the cables to go underground and not on telephone poles. So I got some company from Canada won the franchise for Los Angeles, San Fernando Valley, and but the caveat was they had to build it underground. So they hired a recruiting company who found me, and they kept making me offers, and I'm like, no, look, I'm a New York guy. I'm not going to California. That's like, well, whatever. But finally, they just literally offered me 4 times what I make in New York, and said, we're going to give you a house and a car and, all of this stuff, but you got to come out here. And so I did. And, you're a New York kid. I had to build a 61 channel cable system, which was the first 61 channel interactive system ever built. But at that time, there weren't 61 channels that existed. So I would buy like these character generators who would put just text on the screen. And we had the school lunch channel and the city government channel and the library channel and, all of that stuff just to fill the space. But, being a New York kid, you're out in California, in LA, and everybody's going to movie parties and premieres, and they're part of the entertainment business. And, I would go and talk to, studios and say, I want to get on those lists. And they would go, well, you're like the telephone company or the gas company. You're a utility. You're not in our business. And
how did you feel?
Well, I'm like, well, you guys are not seeing the same thing that I'm seeing where the future is going. And I said, well, the most important marketing vehicle that I think you have is the movie trailer, which are these 2-minute previews of what a movie is. I said, but the only time I ever see it is when I'm in the movies. I said, wouldn't you want me to see that when I'm home so that you make me want to go to the movies? And they went, yeah, but it's really expensive. We can't afford it. I said, tell you what, you give me those movie trailers. I'll put them on TV for you, but you put me on the list for those parties. And they went, yeah, all right, that's fine. So they would literally send us the movie trailers, and, I had a kid edit them together. And, we didn't even give it a name, but we had that trailer channel. And when we started doing, surveys, people would say, oh, my favorite channel, I love CNN, I love MTV, and I love that trailer channel. And I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. I'm getting the best 2 minutes of a $50 million movie. And then that was the big number. I'm getting it for free, and people love it. Well, anyway, I kind of file that in the back of my head. And then the company that I work for sold out, and they went back to Toronto. They went back to Canada, and they said, okay, move back to Canada with us. And I went, no. I said, I didn't go from New York to LA to go to Canada. I said, I don't ever want to be cold again. So a friend of mine, my friend Alan Marufka, who comes from New Jersey, he and I were talking. We said, let's think of something we could do in LA. And
okay, but here I just interfere with the conclusion here. So when rejection came to you, like, what are you doing here? You're from cable, not interested. You cannot come to the events. You didn't deflate it. That's one, because I'm focused on character traits and what we can cultivate as successful leaders.
Yeah.
But you found a side way, right? So again, creativity, innovation. First, you didn't saw yourself as a failure. Oh, no one wants me. I am a failure. I cannot get into this industry. What was in your mind? Oh, wait, I can find something else. I'm interested what was in your mind. What were the words you were using with yourself?
Well, it was pretty much that. I said, I want to go to those things, and I'm going to find a way to do it. And, so you find a kind of a weak spot in them, and they were like, well, we know it's a very effective vehicle, but we can't afford to put it on TV. And you go, well, you know what? I got a lot of empty channels. I could make this work for you as well as work for me at the same time. And again, so I think a lot of that is kind of that creating that win-win thing. You didn't have to beat someone into the ground. You had to figure a way that whatever you're proposing actually worked for both of you. And that's one of the things that I think has kind of stayed with me forever. But when Alan and I started playing with it, it was like right at the very early days of MTV. And, we said, wait a second, the recording industry makes these music videos. They give them to this cable channel for free. And they're standing a host in front of a green screen and saying, hey, Madonna has a new video, and showing the video. We said, if we could get these movie trailers from the studios for free, we could stand a host in front of a green screen and say, and Arnold Schwarzenegger has a new movie. So the initial thought was, we were going to create MTV of the movies. And then we kind of migrated that to be Entertainment Tonight 24 hours a day, saying if the news can now be 24 hours and sports can now be 24 hours and music can be 24 hours, why can't we take entertainment and pop culture and create a 24-hour vehicle as opposed to just having a TV show about it, that was time anchored. Then in the analog TV days, you had to watch 7 o'clock at night or you missed the show and that was it. So, we started out with that MTV of the movies idea and then when we had enough money, we, started going where America watches Hollywood and we started, really broadening out the programming, but we had the financial base. Getting these very valuable movie trailers for nothing, and then help the studios because they started doing surveys and finding the people going to the movies every week to a larger degree were figuring out what movie to go to based on what they saw on E!
Yeah. Was there a moment when you said, I've made it?
No, I still don't have that moment.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know, because usually people who continue to pursue as long as they are living something, they have that kind of drive, internal drive. I still have things to show. I still have something in front of me. Is this your drive?
Yeah, still mountains to climb. I mean, that's kind of the way I do it. I mean, when I went off to Russia, I had the #1 TV show in Russia for 10 years. That I brought over there. And, and then I said, what could be an even bigger challenge than Russia? I said, let me go to China. Producing, it's funny because people ask me the question, like, what's your highlight moment? And financially, certainly E! was, the best. And it's arguably the biggest influence of pop culture in the world. But I decided that at this age I'm funny, so I decided I'm going to write comedy. So everybody says, the hardest thing to do is write comedy, and it doesn't translate culturally. So I said, okay, that's a good challenge. So I decided I wrote a comedy about the contradictions of modern Chinese life. Well, what happens when you have incredible economic growth in a short period of time? And people's social skills don't grow as quick as their bank account. And, they wear Gucci this and Prada that and gold chains and, you have to drive the Ferrari and stuff. So I wrote this comedy about a boy who does really well and living in Beijing, but then decides to go back to his roots in this little village in rural China and stuff like that. So the show is called Return to the Village of Good Fortune. And it ends up getting nominated. Well, first it goes 72 episodes, which I finally had to stop saying, okay, I can't be funny for more than 72. But it gets nominated at the Asia TV Awards. And it's the only comedy from China that's nominated that year. And we didn't win. But that's the point I sat back and said, wait a second. I wrote a comedy in a culture I didn't grow up in, and
that's
it's
amazing.
nominated. I said, that's pretty cool. Figuring out that people around the world like Hollywood gossip, I went, okay, yeah. I mean, we did it, and obviously we executed it quite well. I said, but that's not really rocket science. I said, writing a comedy for China that ends up being the only one from China nominated for the Asia TV Awards, I said, that's cool. I like that one. So yeah, so that's my highlight point.
And I can also see this kind of child energy, excitement when you're talking about your project. Oh, let's try this. This is interesting. I would love to test this as well, because you are perceived as a very serious person when you're talking, usually. But when you're talking about your project and your test and where you are at the beginning and you want to overcome some difficulties in an industry that is non-existent, you get this kind of spark in your eyes, like a child. Ooh, this is very cool. And you continued with comedy. You would just have a new project if you want to talk about it or about your projects that are going on.
Yeah, well, I with COVID, it was very restrictive to go to China. You had to quarantine and stuff like that. And I have a partner in China, a woman named Jin Zhang, and so I wasn't able to go there with the quarantine. But quite honestly, the company now, we've increased headcount, increased profitability in China, and I've just learned that she actually could run the Chinese company better than I do. I'm good for the vision part, but running the day to day, she is tougher than me and stuff like that. So that works really good. But I got back into doing stuff in the US again. And most of it started out a little bit conscious, but not totally conscious. Always wanted to do something that had a social good component. I didn't only want to be known as, oh, there's that Kardashians guy, and I wanted something to have some more responsible aspect to it. So the first one we did, we created a show. It was financial wellness for millennials, because particularly here in the United States, they don't learn a lot of life skills, particularly when it revolves around money. So we did that. And then the next one we did, and we're actually out now pitching it, is called Conscious Parenting, which really gets back to the stuff we talked to before. It's being a parent in today's world is so much more complex than it was when my mom had me.
Absolutely. Yes.
When I was born, my mother took me home from the hospital, and my grandmother lived upstairs. My aunt lived next door.
The
So my
tribe,
mother had the proverbial village.
the
Um,
village, yes.
Now these kids don't really know their grandparents, and when modern medicine, they have the baby in the morning, and in the afternoon they hand you this child, and they go, "Here you go," and you're like, "What do I do with this?" And then you kind of couple it with not having the village. Most people don't have that village anymore. You have school shootings, and you have bullying and gender identification issues, and climate change and social media and stuff. It's really hard to be a parent. So we found this woman in Hong Kong who conscious parenting. Her name's Catherine Celery. And so we created a series called Conscious Parenting, which we're now taking out. And, the other thing that I've learned, now that my kids are older, you used to think, oh, I can't wait till they're 18, they're out of the house. Well, it doesn't work like that. When you're the parent for the rest of your life, whether you like it or not. And, and then we went on, we're doing another series called Uncanceled, all about cancel culture. Doing that. And then, the latest one we're doing actually in the podcast world, because we like podcasts. It's kind of my observation. I'm very good at observing people's cultures and stuff. And I've always been fascinated with, you go out for dinner with a few couples, and one woman says, I have to go to the restroom. And then they all get up and they go to the restroom together. And I'm like, why do they do that? And like, they come back 15 minutes later, and like the guys are sitting there going, where are they? What are they doing? But it really is, it's kind of a metaphor for this camaraderie among women that I don't think men have. We don't have the same thing. And, women will come back and go, oh, well, I met this young girl in the bathroom, and she had the latest in the MAC eyeshadow. And look, she did my eyes. And I'm going, like, you didn't know her going in, and you let her put eyeshadow on your eyes. But there's this thing among women that men don't share.
Around some topics, yes. Not all, but yeah.
We created this series called Stall Talk, and it's really, again, it's not about the bed, but it's about that camaraderie there. And it's women of different ages. So I have a 60-year-old, very famous old actress in the U.S. who's on Dallas and a lot of famous TV shows. And then a young gal who's 23, a real Gen Zer, and then two other gals. One is a young woman in a corporation that's mainly male dominated, and the other is a celebrity stylist that came from Australia. and is trying to figure out what it is. Since single gal trying to figure out Los Angeles, which is not easy for a single gal, and she's like 38, I think. So it's basically taking either the things that are in the news or just social issues or cultural issues and examining those through the eyes of women of different generations.
And where can people see these shows?
Well, we just shot the pilot of it, and it's going to start producing in middle of August. And it'll be a new episode every week, and it'll be on most of the platforms like the iTunes platform, and wherever you could find podcasts, it'll be. And it's called Stall Talk, Stall.
Okay, and because you mentioned dinner, and you are a good cook between other things. I'm just curious to get it personal. If I would come for dinner to your house with a couple of friends, what would you cook for us?
Well, I could cook Romanian food for you, but well, literally since I'm 12, I've been cooking because both my parents worked, and the choice was eat peanut butter and jelly sandwich for dinner or learn how to cook. So I learned how to cook, and I always loved it, and I fascinated. And even to this day, I buy a new cookbook every month and I cook it. So I could cook almost anything. But what impresses people the most is I'm a really good Chinese cook. And even when my Chinese friends come over the house, they're like going, I haven't had this stuff since my grandmother used to cook it. So that Italian food, I literally
So
could
you
cook.
know the entire palette. You could also have a TV show where you combine wisdom nuggets that you learned from life while you are cooking us a dinner.
Yeah, it's again, it's strange. In China, I actually did a cooking show, and
Wow,
me
I
cooking
didn't know that.
Chinese, and but I'm actually writing a book. Somebody's been after me to write a book for years and years and years, and I just wouldn't do it. But then I decided that I'm gonna kind of take the different phases of my life and create a cookbook with anecdotes. So I'm doing, my growing up years, my Manhattan cable years, my Valley cable years, my E years, my Russia years, my China years. And so I'm doing the recipes that inspired me during that time with little stories to accompany those times of my life. So by the end of the summer, I hope to have it finished.
Wow, I'm rooting for you because I know this is a very personal project. And if you can imagine, our hour is done, but I cannot just finish before we touch base again, the financial prosperity aspect, because many of the people, and here I truly want to help those around the world, and especially doing good, not just NGOs, but also startup founders who are innovating and solution that might be fruitful later, and it's harder to solve and to sell and also to get the funding. And I noticed that the good-hearted people and leaders are usually very awkward around money, and their attitude is not there, and they are struggling much more than just the ruthless type of businessman, and I would love to give some tips from your experience. What was your attitude around the money when you did those great deals around everything you've done and so many businesses you intermediated, and even you're investing in businesses today? So what would be your advice around money for these leaders around the globe doing good?
Well, I think being nice is good business. Doing good is good business. I think it comes back to you. I mean, an old friend of mine named Blake McCoskey, we were trying to do a TV network about reality TV. And it was very early on, and it ended up that we decided against it, that we didn't think it was long lasting. But, Blake went off and started doing stuff in the Amazon. He came back and said, I got to do something because I found all these kids that live down there that don't have enough money. They don't even have shoes. So he started a company called Tom Shoes. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Tom Shoes. Basically, what he did was for every time you bought a pair of his shoes, he donated 2 pairs of shoes to a kid in the Amazon. And it just took off. And Blake sold that company, I think, for almost $1 billion, because it had such a loyal base of people who wanted to not just spend their money on a cool pair of shoes, but wanted to feel their money was also going for something important. And that whole idea of corporate giving or corporate responsibility, I think everybody learned from Tom's shoes. You could do both. You could build a successful company and you could do good at the same time. And actually doing good sometimes is what propels you to become that huge successful company. And Tom's shoes, I think, is the perfect example.
And what would you do about the attitude, especially those who are also from an NGO space, that they are perceived as below a successful psychopath who did a lot of money, you know, but doesn't bring any good for the world? And you have an NGO or a company that brings a lot of good to the world, but you feel like you are begging, you don't have that kind of self-confidence in this space. What would you suggest them to do?
Yeah, well, I'm a great believer that everything has to have a strong financial model behind it and it has to be sustainable. So even with us, we won't create a TV series unless we feel that we could create a business related to that thing, because you could be passionate about it, it could be great, but if you can't create the financial structure to keep it sustainable over the long haul, you're wasting a lot of your valuable time. You got to put your time into things that are sustainable finance. So they have to have a strong financial base. Otherwise, they come and go. Life takes over. When you're young and optimistic, it's like, hey, I'm going to change the world. But then you got to pay the rent, you got to eat, and you have a kid, and all those things. So having enough money to do the things that you want to do and know that you need to do is an important part. You can't just say, I'm going to be good and not worry about making money. You have to really figure out how to do the balance.
Larry, this was awesome. I hope you felt good at our show today. Is there anything you would love me to ask you and I didn't?
No, I'm a huge believer in artificial intelligence. I've been using it from the very beginning. And I think there are, levels of laws and regulations that have to happen so that bad people know that there's consequences for doing bad things. But it's inevitable. You go back and you look at, cavemen used to paint on the wall of a cave, and when somebody developed paint and canvas, they weren't real happy. But yet you can't stop, technology from marching on. I mean, people that were horse ranchers, weren't happy when somebody developed a gas engine car. They wanted people to ride horse and buggies, but technology, if it has a good component to it, it's going to find its way into the marketplace. AI, the same thing. If you were to come to me and say, can you write a synopsis for a TV series about anything, it normally takes me 5 days. Now using AI, and I openly admit I use it, it's a great tool. It takes me 30 seconds using ChatGPT, and then I spend an hour editing it and cleaning it up, because it's never 100%. You have to humanize it. You have to add that human level to it and empathy to it. And so now in 1 hour, I'm doing what used to take me 5 days. And I try to explain people in the Screen Actors Guild and the Writers Guild and stuff. I go, how could you not love this? Because the one thing we all have as human beings, we all have a limited amount of time on this planet.
Yeah.
And you got to use it, in the best way. And, I said, now with all of, I could either do more of these and make more money, if that's what I need. I can spend those extra days playing with my grandchild, because I now have one. Or I could learn how to speak a foreign language or learn a new recipe. Or I said, how could you not love being able to reclaim that much time for yourself and stuff? So I'm a huge, huge believer in AI. And so now, again, I do think there needs to be some level of regulation and, training that goes on there. But, it's coming whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I think some are seeing this as a threat, and this makes you special, successful, because you are taking with what is coming. Okay, let's analyze it. Is this something new? Because you can always find something else to do and innovate based on what you have. But embracing technology today is just something that can free you up from time, and it is the way to go.
Yep.
Is
So-
there anything else that you would want people to know right now about your projects, except we have a book coming up, a cookbook, and your new show for women? And
No, that's pretty much it.
perfect. This was a blast. Thank you so much, Larry. And hopefully we will have a future show together where we'll see what happened in the meantime.